Alright guys, you're welcome back. In this particular video, we'll be diving in straight to applying JavaScript into our code to ensure that all of these things comes alive. But before we do that, I would love to add a status to indicate the status of that particular task, right? So that this stuff will be much more prettier. So under my trash here, I'm going to add a bootstrap class called badge, right? So this badge is going to have a BG of, let's say, secondary, right? And if the start has not started, let's say pending. So let's call it pending so you can see it there. So let's float it to the end. So we're going to say float end, we take it to the end. Alright, cool. So now we have it like this. So this signifies that okay, this particular task have not started. Now the next thing I want us to do is ability to add a certain task, right? How can we add a task? So for us to know how to add a task, we need to know how to basically read tags. Now that being said, the first thing I want to do is to link up our script.js. Remember in the first video, we created a file called script.js, which is our JavaScript file. So let's link it as an external JavaScript. So I'll scroll down to the ending of my page here, and I will include that particular tag called script, not span, called scripts, then source src / script.js. So now I can easily go to my script.js file now, and let us test it to see if everything is working fine. Everything should be working fine, of course. If we also save this as well, then this shows us that everything is working fine. You can see the form has been alerted. So the next thing we want to do is to track when a user submits this particular form. Now I want to ensure that when the user submits this particular form, it is not being reloaded. So I want to prevent this. Now watch this. The moment I click this and I filled in something here, anything I like, and I click on add to do, the form entirely reload, the entire page reload. So we want to prevent that particular action, right? So let's track when that particular form is submitted. So on our form here, we're going to give this an ID, and we're going to call this ID add form or add tags ID. Alright, let's call it add tags. So I'm going to save this now. Let's use capital letter add tags ID. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to my first JavaScript. I'm going to use event listener. So I'm going to say document dot get elements by ID, in this case, then dot add event listener. Then I'm going to have what I want to listen to. I want to listen to submit. Then in my submit, I can have a callback function. E stands for event. Then yep, so this is my callback function. So now I can prevent that stuff. I can say e.prevent default. You see that? So I can capture that now. Then before I can now say alert anything. So let's test this. So let us alert submitting. Right? So if I come down here now and I click on add tags and I type in something as a tag and I click on this, you're going to say submitting, and you see it's still there. Because it's still there, obviously my data, I'm preventing that default submission that HTML form will want me to do. So once I've done that, so the next thing I want to do now is the ability to get this form data whatsoever they filled in here, right? So I can do that by giving it an ID and say ID is equal to add tags. You know what? Let's call this one add tags. Why we call the form add form? Yeah. Add form add tag. So this will work perfectly. So let's call this one add form. Right. So once I have that I can now have my add tags input field. So for me to get my add tags input field, all I just need to do is to say my element now is document dot get element by ID, right? Add tags dot value. Alright, that's it. Then value, I'll add this here. You just need to come here and say I can use constant, or let's use to do equal to this, right? Then I can alert to do. Let us see what that will give us to do. Alright, so I'll save that now. If I come in here and I say coding and I click on submit, I'm expecting it to say coding. So I can actually get this particular data now. If I come here, I say painting, I click here, I can actually get painting. So now, so since we've done this, the next thing is we want to basically add this stuff so that this our data here will change. Then I will come on top of this particular area. I'm going to declare an empty array. So I'm going to say constant to do data or tax data. Let's call it tax, constant tax. So tax is like all our tax, right? So tax is equal to an empty array, right? So this will give us like an empty array by default. Then so what we want to do now, let's console log this, console.log tax. All right, so this is like perfect now. Then so let me right click here and say inspect, and I will say console. Let me change it to my console to be underneath it. Yeah, all right, something like this. And this is cool. I don't necessarily want this, so this is cool. So you could see that the array is 0. Its tax array is 0. So if we add something now, I'm expecting this particular tax array to give me something next that is not 0, right? So if I'm adding something to it now, I'll clear this to do out. So I want to add it now. So I will say tax, which is tax.push. So I should be able to push this data. I want to push this particular one inside there. So I will say to do now is the value, then this other to do. So I'll say to do, yeah, then comma, I'll now say status. So status will be my default status, which I will say in this case I'll say pending, right? I'll say pending and I'll save it. So that's what I'll do. So of course you see this stuff is 0. Then I can go ahead and console log tax. Actually, I can say console.log console.log. Let's do this task. All right. So I can console.log task. So let's try this now. So I'll click on add task. I'll say to do, and I'll click on this, and you can see that it's giving me 1, which is to do. If I add painting to this as well, it's going to give me I'm going to have 2 here. I'm going to have to do status pending, painting status pending. So now that we know how to basically add this stuff, so the next thing that we want to know how to do is, I can actually take this out. So the next thing, let me delete it, everything will refresh. So the next thing I would love to know how to do is the ability to render these tags that I've created here. Right, so let's render all our tags basically. Now for us to render all our tags, I would love us to create a function here, or let us try something out. Right, so we'll go back to where we have our card. So this is our card. So this card now will depict like what we want to render. So I'll cut this. I just copied the Ctrl X to cut it out. Then I can actually I can create a div here now, and I can give this particular div an ID, and this ID will be content. Amazing. So inside here, that will be where that stuff will come in, right? So if we go back to our script tag now, and we do something like document, let's say constant elements is equal to document.get element by ID contents, right? Perfect. So I can say elements dot inner HTML is equal to, I'll use backticks, then I can paste this in a way, and I can save this. So the moment I save this, now you could see that I'm using DOM manipulation to update my DOM. Let me bring this down a bit. I'm using DOM manipulation to update my DOM to ensure that this particular stuff is being included inside of our element. So now what I want to do now is to run a map function to ensure that once we have a lot of tags inside here, we can actually run through this array and display this stuff by basically creating a render function, for that. So what we are going to do now is, let me create a function called render, then to ensure that that render function will be able to add all of this to us. So I'm going to come in here now. Let me start from here. Let's say constant render. Constant render is going to receive data. In this case, data is receiving is tags. It's going to receive data, or we can make it a callback function like this. Yep. So it's going to receive this, and we are going to return. We're going to return this. All right. So basically, we don't necessarily need to return anything because we're going to update it. So I'm going to pick all of this now, Ctrl X, and paste it inside my render function. So this render function will be the one that will be responsible for updating my to-do. So once I have this now, yep. So what I want you to do is to get the element first. Then once you get the element, so I'm going to say elements dot inner HTML is equal to empty. So I want you to like delete everything that is inside the inner HTML at first by giving it empty. Then now I will now update it what is inside that particular area by running through a map. So for me to do this now, this is where I'll run a map. I will say data dot map, right? And of course map carries a callback function which has two arguments, value and key. In this case, we just need only value. Then so inside this particular map now, I'm going to have this. So I'm going to copy all of this now, X. Then I will paste all of this inside of it. Perfect. So guess what I'm trying to do here? What I'm trying to do now is to map through this particular array called tags, and so that all of this stuff will be there. Now in this case, I will use this operator called plus equal to. So this will work like appending. Now I would have used element.append, which you just only append it once, but with the plus we're able to like append HTML element. So if I have something like this, I think my render function is complete. Then I can actually save this. So everything is empty. Then upon reload, the first thing I want to call my render function, and I'm going to use this particular stuff now, tags test, which is tasks. Here's my tags, and I'll save it. Now nothing is there. Now assuming that our tags has a value, whereby we have like our to do here. We have our to do here, and this to do here, let's say the to do here is coding, for example, and let us use coding, comma, status, and status, let's say pending, right? So we are going to have this there by default, right? So because this render function is what is responsible for rendering this. If this stuff is also 2 as well, if I make it 2, the second one is painting as well. So it's going to render it 2 of it. So since we have that rendering there, so how can we use our render function to ensure that the right values are the one being rendered out here? So what we're going to do now is this value has everything in it. So value.title or to do will give us the first one. So inside here we have tags title comes in here. So this is where we're going to have like we're going to use $sign this to enable us to have that. So we say value.to do. So if I save this now, you could see that coding and painting is actually coming inside. Then once stuff, let's edit this other one to be let's edit this second one to be instead of pending, the second status could be in progress. So let me type in progress there, so that we can actually update this stuff with that particular status. So I'm going to change this to $, my curly braces, val.pending, val.status, sorry. So val.status. So if I have val.status, now here I have pending, I have in progress, just the same way it is in the second one. So the next thing I want to do is to ensure that the right color is actually changing in here. So if I want the right colors to change, I'm just going to write a simple, there should be a simple, an if else statement should occur here, right, to ensure that the right color is being outputted. So I'm going to delete this particular BG pending, or I can do something like this, a space here. I can have my asterisk, my sign here to break it down here, and I can have something like this. Perfect. So in here now, I would say, of course, if pending, if value.status is equal to pending, so this is what we are going to do now. If value.status is exactly equal to pending, what should happen? We should echo bg dash secondary class, right? Then we could also do another one again, else I could break this down again, value dot status is equal to else value dot status is equal to, the next one should be else value dot status is equal to in progress, in dash progress, right? We should echo question sign. We should echo what should we echo now? BG dot warning, right? Then else we should echo BG. Of course, if it's not in progress and is not pending, it should be BG dot success, right? So I could make this double quote, BG dot success. All right, so this is just a simple conditional statement. So you could see in pending is working. So basically our pending is not coming up. I think I made a mistake here. Instead of spelling that secondary, I omitted the R. So I'm going to include that, and yeah, everything is working fine now. Right, so this is we just using a simple object literal or ternary, that's what it's called, to actually do our conditional statements to make it a little bit more cleaner. So this is if status is equal to pending, let the class be BG secondary, else if status is equal to in progress, let the answer be let the class be BG warning, else the class should be BG success, in such a way now that if this pending becomes success, right, and we save that, this stuff is going to be green and it's going to show us success, of course. So for now we want this to be pending, so pending is going to show us that gray area, so pending. All right, so that being said, we have concluded our render function, right? So our render function is giving us an amazing rendering of event here, right? So which is really good. So another thing again we want to do again before we conclude our render function. Okay, we'll come back to our render function. So what I would do is just compress this to close it so that everything will look clean. Now that we know how to do this, now the thing is, if we create a new task, of course, and we push it to what we have in our task already, so we want to be able to update to call this particular render function. So all we just need to do is, instead of console logging it here, we need to come over here and just call back our render function. Now, so if we have something like this now, if I create a new task, coding, painting, let's say traveling, because I don't know if traveling is a task, and we add this in here. Let's close it now, and we can see that traveling has been added to our task down here, right? So now, but another issue, we see that once we add traveling to our task, or let's say we add another task, for example, what other task should we add? Let's say writing. Now, if we do any of this, our form, sorry, I'm still press Ctrl Save. Our form is still, if I add this task now, there is no any message showing us our task has been successfully added and stuff like that, and this form is still here. And if I close this now, you will see that writing is still here. So let's find a way that we should be able to close this, right? When we add a new task, we should be able to close this when we add a new task. So let's find a way and see how we can do that. So I'll go back to my badges. I'll go back to my Bootstrap, and I'll see if you go back to model in Bootstrap. Of course, you scroll down a bit in Bootstrap, you'll see something right here in Bootstrap 5 official documentation. You scroll down, you will see that, see, this line will enable us get that particular model. Then if we get that particular model with this, then we should be able to like close it either using toggle or using show to do that, or using model.hide to do that. I love to just use toggle. Then let's copy this. So let's copy this. Let's go back to our code, and let me minimize this now. So what I'm going to do now is to basically get my Bootstrap, that particular one, which will come in around here after I must have rendered my tags. So this should be it. So this is my model, so I'll call this add model. Then let's go and look for the ID. So if we go back to our CSS here, the ID of this stuff is called example model, right? So let's change it to add model. Add model. So if we change the ID here, that simply means on our button we also need to change it from target or example model to add model, right? So if we do that, let's ensure that everything is still working. We did not break anything, of course. We did not break anything. So since we did not break anything, which seems to be amazing, so the next thing that we're going to do is to come back here and include that particular add model here as well. So we don't necessarily need this function. Yes, so we have our add model there. So once that is done, we can easily say add model. Can I say add model dot hide, right? So let's use the word hide. All right, this will basically close it for us. Then let's save this. So let's try coding and painting. Those stuff I've removed, deleted. Let's try another one. So let's try traveling as a task, and we'll click on add tags, and let's see. Oops, this stuff, I think we've broken everything. All right, let's do toggle instead. Let's see if toggle will do the magic for us. All right, so let's add the tags and see. Oops. Okay. I think we're not picking it well. Let's try something. Control X here. Let's put it somewhere around here. And let's try it one more time. Get element by ID, add model. All right, let's do that one more time, and let's see if this works for us now. Let's add our tags. Traveling. All right, so traveling. All right, so I think it works fine. So we should not put it inside it. Let's put it outside, and everything works just perfectly fine. So let's try that. So we have painting there. Want to add a new tags. Let's add another new tags, like what now? Let's add another new tags like working or writing or something. So once the tags is added, you see working is there by default. Now, so we have everything perfectly fine. So we can basically add our tags. Once we add our tags, this toggle stuff model.toggle or model.hide. Let's try model.hide. I think model.hide should work it too as well. So model.hide should work it too as well. Let's try writing, working, perfect. So yeah, see that it's been added there to our tags. So once we have that, everything seems to be fine, and this array needs to be an empty array. So let's take this one out. We just use this to test. So this is what we have. So it's an empty array. So once we add a new tax now, let's say traveling, so it's there. We add another tax. Let's say coding as well is there as well. So once we add another tax, it comes beneath it, and everything seems to be amazing, seems to be fresh. So now another thing that we need to do as well, another tax that we would love to add, another thing we need to do is the ability to edit our tags, right? So let's see how we can edit our tags. Now for us to edit our tags, we need to create a function. So let's do something like this. Let's do comments. Let's call this one create or add. Then let's do another comment. Let's call this one edit. Now for editing, let's create a constant. Edit is equal to a callback function that's going to carry an argument called id, right? And let's alert this id now. Alert id. All right. So once we have this, oops, I've deleted all my tags. So once we have this now, we want to render id data. Then we'll go back to our render function, and in our render function now we want to say on click edit, guys. So that's what we want to do. So in our render function where we have edit, I think already added here, where we have this edit here, edit button. So we want to add an on-click event. On-click is equal to in quotes edit, right? Now let us type in one here. I'll show you something. So let us add the default tags here, anything that we like, one edit. So it's going to give us that one. That is because we included one here. So but one is not what we want to add. So what we want to add now is the value, which is the id. So the id in this case now is the key. So we are going to add a second argument here. So we're going to say comma key, right? So once we have key there, we'll come over here and we'll say asterisk, and we have our key here too as well. So let's save this. So once we save this now, we'll click here and we add a certain tax here and click on add to do. I will click here, it's going to give us the key. So in this case the key is 0. So if we add another tax now where the another tax is coding, add tax, right? So let's say edit of coding, the key is 1 and the key is 0. So this will enable us to know the array position. So the key in this case is the array position. So while we are knowing the array position, let me close this console. So while we know the array position, right, we can use that to edit our tags, right? So we can use that to know the exact tags that we are editing. So that being said, at the same time, we also want another model to appear where we'll be able to see our edit tags, right? So we'll go back to index and I will duplicate this. Let me just close all of this and I will copy all of this and I will paste it again. Instead of call it add model, let's call this one edit model, and in this particular edit model, let's change this to edit model 2 as well. Then this tax, new tax, change it to edit tax. Then in our form, let's change this to edit form as well. Then so we have something like this. So what we want to do now, save this. What I want to do now is to ensure that once it's been edited, one is being edited, where is that area? So one is being edited, this particular model, which is this one. Where is that stuff? Okay, this is it here. Add model. So I'm going to do Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I'll name this edit model, but in this case is edits. All right, perfect. So with this one now, we can actually edit our model, right? So I'll copy this particular edit model now. Then so with this now, I'll be able to like show my model, right? So I don't want this ID here. I'm just trying to show you that we can get that particular ID. So now we can click on edit model dot show, right? So the show will enable us to turn that thing on. So let's see, let's try it. So I'm going to add a default tags traveling and edit model. See, edit tags. That other model will appear on edit tags, so which is cool. So I'll come back in here now. So since we have this particular edit tags appearing whenever they click edit here, so we want to fill it with the to do, which is traveling. One we click here, to do will be here. So which simply means this one is so this is not add edit tags, so let's call this one edit tags. So we'll call this edit tags. So once we call this edit tags and want to be able to add a particular value in there, right? So I'll copy this, save it a bit, come back in here, and I will use my edit tags now. I will say documents dot get element by ID, right? My edit tags now will be my edit tags dot value, right? My edit tags dot value will be equal to my edit tags dot value will be equal to what now? Will be equal to tags. Remember we completed this tags here, right? So it will be equal to tags, then this, then ID, right? So this will be my ID, then dot to do. Amazing. So with this now we've read that singular one. So let's try it. So let's try if this particular line of code works. So if it's a tag that will add traveling, for example, have traveling, they will also have traveling in there. So let's add another one. If we have writing, right? So click this, we have like edit this, also have writing in there. Edit this, we have traveling in there. So yep. So we've been able to like fetch that. So you see how we use that ID here. So we're using this particular ID to know the array position so that we can actually input that particular data there. So once we have that in our edit tag, so the next thing, so instead of add button, add to do, so let's call this one, let's call this save changes. I'm going to call this save changes. Then if I call this save changes, the next thing I want to have here, I want to have like copy this as well, paste it here. This is going to be my status, of course, and I'm going to have, I'll delete this, I'm going to have select, I'm going to have a select tag, and the ID is going to be edit status. All right, I don't need a name for it basically, so I'll need like 3 options. So option, the first one is going to be pending, and I'm going to type pending here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V twice. I'm going to have in progress here, and I'm going to type in progress here. So I'm going to have completed here, and I'm going to type completed here as well. Alright, so this is cool. So we have completed, everything is fine, and so everything seems cool to me. So if I save this now, I should be able to go back to my scripts and do the same thing to this ID. This ID here is called edit status, right? It's capital letter S. So I'll come here, I'll do the same thing to edit status, right? Edit status, then ID, then here will be status. All right, so then I'll save this now. So yep, so once we add a new tags, traveling, blah blah, edit status. Okay, we didn't add something to our HTML. We need to add a class here, a form control class. All right, so this is it. Let's try it again. All right, edit. So status is pending. Then we can click here, we can change it. Then of course we can save changes, but for now we cannot save changes because we've not done this. So we need to create a function that will enable us to save changes, right? So we can read this individual tags. So we need to create a function that will enable us to save changes. Now for us to do that, we need to say, so we have our edit form here. So it's going to look like something similar to what we did here. So in this crate, so I'm just going to copy this. So I'm not going to say save edit, save edit. So paste it here. So it's going to be edit form. Of course, we are adding event listener on submit, prevent default on submit. So the to do that we have here now is going to be edit tags, not add tags. Edit tags. Then I'm going to do paste as well. Then this one will be status. So the status that we are going to have here as well is going to be the status that we have here as well is also going to be what else? Status that we have here is going to be edit status as well. Ctrl C, Ctrl V. So that will be our status as well. Then we are going to like update it, right? We're going to update it. So if we want to update it now, the next thing that we're going to do is, so let's try to update this. So let's update it. So so if we want to update this, we are going to see it's not going to be push. It's going to be status dot the ID. Yep. So it's going to be dot the ID basically, right? So which is quite tricky now because we know that this ID is here. So we need to find a way to store this particular ID so that we can pick it up. So one way that we can persist this particular ID, I'm thinking, one way that we can persist this particular ID is using our local storage, right? To persist this particular ID because it's not the same form, right? So it's not the same form. So because of it's not the same form, we will not be able to like get the same ID, right? We'll not be able to get the same ID. So I'm going to persist this particular ID now. I'm going to use local storage dot set item. So this stuff is going to have two things. So it's going to have like ID. You're going to have like ID, comma, then the ID that we want to save, which is this one. So let us call this one tax ID. Tax ID work. Tax ID, then ID. So with this now we've saved that particular value. Then when we come under here now, we can be able to like get that particular ID. So tax ID now is going to be so you can say let ID equal to local storage dot get item. So get item, get what we've stored. So in this case, what we want to get is this particular value that we've stored here, right? So I could put this like this. So we want to get this particular value here, which is tax ID, right? So let's try it out. Let's try this out. So once we have that, I'm going to comment out this line. So let's alert. Let's see if we can get our ID in here using local storage. All right. So let's try this out. So if we don't get it like this, another way that we could do is to update our ID value and make it hidden. I think that would be the best way to do this stuff, not this approach. But let's try this approach and see if this approach will work. traveling, how to do. So we have this here. So I'm going to click on edit. I'm going to click on edit tags right now, and I'm going to click on save changes. I'm going to have 0. Oops, so it worked. So let's add another one. Let's add coding, right? So using local storage actually will work. So let's see this edit tags. So this should give me 1. See, that's perfect. So it's working perfectly, right? So this is me like persisting the data using local storage. Now another way that I would have persisted this particular data without using local storage is, so you guys could try it out. Another way that we could actually go about solving the same problem is probably adding an input field here, but the type is going to be hidden, of course. So once you make it hidden, then you will be able to like update it here. When you come down here under your edits, where we are updating this particular one, you can update the ID here. Then when you come here, you can get it here instead of using local storage to persist the information, right? So I think that other one would be a better approach to approach things. So let's try it. So what I'm trying to say is, if you come in here now, instead of you having this stuff here, so this is where we have like our select and stuff, right? We're gonna have another input. You could have another input here, right? And you know, apart from stuff, we could have hidden here, and the value now can be you may not put any value at the moment because we're going to update the value. Then we're gonna have ID. Let's say ID is equal to tax ID, right? So you can do something like this. ID is equal to tax ID. So nobody's going to see anything actually. Even if we add, let's add the value, just make it empty, tax ID. So nobody's going to see anything. So once we copy this, you come down here under edit now. So we're going to have Ctrl V, Ctrl C, because we're going to have like tax ID. I'm showing like another way we can go about it. Let me be sure. Tax, okay, capital letter D. No, let's use small letter D. Perfect. I will also use small letter D here too. Okay, perfect. So once, let me comment out this one. I just want to show you guys like 2 different options to go about this. So tax ID is equal to dot value is equal to blah blah. No, it's not going to be equal to all of this stuff. It's going to just be equal to ID because we've gotten the ID here, right? It's ID, so it's equal to this particular ID. So when we are getting this value now, so instead of using this local storage, you can say this, then this will be my ID basically, and I'll say tax ID, of course. Ctrl C, Ctrl V here to give you my tax ID here. So you see that. And so this should still work for us. So let's try it. Traveling, submit, edit. Oops. See, 0, still working fine. So this without using local storage. So this is like 2 different ways to solve one thing, right? And I will prefer this because if I'm using local storage, it's like I'm saving it inside the browser, right? So I don't really want to do that. So edit, save changes 1, perfect. Edit, save changes 0, perfect. So I'll prefer this second option. I think the second option is the best option, right? Instead of storing in our local storage, right? So I wouldn't want to do that. So I would delete this. Then okay, now since we have our status ID and everything in place, so the next thing is let's update it. So if we want to carry out the update instead of push, you know, when we are adding we use push. So in this case now we're going to use tax.id. Tax.id is tax. No, not like this. ID dot to do is equal to do, perfect. Then status as well is equal to status as well. Then alright, so with this we have actually updated it. Then we can now re-render tax as well. Then of course we could hide the model, but this model now is not it's not an add model, so it's an edit model. So we can hide the model, or we might not necessarily hide the model. We might just probably say something. But let's try it out. So if we have this and we have traveling, it's called traveling now. This one, let's change it from, okay, let's not call it pending, let's change it from in progress, for example, and click on save changes. You see, traveling has moved to in progress, right? I'll move it to completed, save changes. See, it has moved to completed, right? So which is super amazing. So we are even if we want to change the title to working or something, and click the save changes, that have moved to working. So our render tag still works. So we see editing is working perfectly fine, right? So the next thing that we could do is, so another thing that you might try to do is, instead of you closing the model, right? So if you don't want to close this particular model, so you could also do, you can include something like say changes saved or something, right? So let's try that. So what I'm trying to say is, inside this edit tags here, right? If we add something like this, let's say like a paragraph text now, and say and give it a class. This class, let's give it text dot success. Text dot success will give us that stuff. I will say changes saved, or let's say changes saved. So this is like a success message that you can impute, right? So you can impute it before your input stuff. So let's save this now. So it will save it, everything will go off, of course. So let's try this out and edit. So it's going to appear like this, right? Changes saved, or we could add a question mark to this particular stuff. So, but if we want to do it like this, we need to just make sure that the paragraph text is there. I will give it an ID of success. We give it an ID of success. So everything is basically just dumb manipulation. So if we give it an ID of success, then we can pick this particular ID now, and I will come down here inside our script tag. So instead of us closing the model, we can choose not to close the model. We can choose to just say, okay, documents dot get elements by ID blah 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 success dot inner HTML is equal to our success made changes save, something like this. So we can save it now. So in this case, if you add a new task like traveling now, for example, I'll click on edit, I will change it from pending to in progress and click on save changes. It's going to say changes save, and the moment you close down here, you're going to see it, of course, it's showing you in progress as well. It's showing you in progress. Then when you go back again, so the disadvantage is that when you go back to it, it keeps us showing us this changes saved. So one way other people will do it is to ensure that you put like a timeout to it. So you can actually set a timeout where it will clear that particular value as well, right? So you can actually set a timeout to it. So me, I'm not going to set a timeout. I just want to show you that different ways you could do that. For me, I would love to hide this particular model actually. So if I hide this particular model, I'll go back here and just comment this one out as well, because we are not using that either, right? So I think I prefer, for now, I'll prefer me editing my stuff to completed or in pending like this, and click on save changes, and everything just clears off, and I see that it is in progress, right? Right now, the next thing I want to do is to handle the delete aspect. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to type in trash, then I'm going to create a function called constant trash, just similar to what we did with the delete, and we have an ID here. I'm going to say equal to a callback function, as we always use. Then we are going to say, so we're going to use a JavaScript method called splice to do this. So for us to delete it, we're going to say tags. So tags is our array, of course. We're going to say splice. In this case now, splice has two arguments. The first one is the array position that you want to delete from the array, while the second one is the While the second one is how many items that you want to delete, which in our case is 1. So the array position is ID, how many is 1. So once we do this, we have that deleted, and we come over here called tags, and we'll place it here called render it called tags. Then not just that, the next thing I want you to do is to go back to our render function and copy this on click here, right, and paste it to the trash can as well. So we can tag the on click area and we'll call this what trash as well. So once we have this now, so if I add a value here called traveling, and I add another value here called coding as well, and click this, and if I want to delete this now, I can easily just say trash, and that will go off, or say trash, and that will go off. So the next thing I want to do whenever we add a to-do list like this and want to delete it, instead of just to delete it clearly, we want to ensure that when we add a to-do list and want to delete it, it should bring out an alert box asking us if we are sure that we really want to delete it. And if we click OK, we'll directly delete it. So for me to do that now, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say if I'll use a JavaScript method called confirm. Inside this place, I'm going to say, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure you want to delete tags? I'm going to ask them that particular question. And if it is true, you know what it is, right? You should go ahead and delete it. But if it is not true, anything else could happen. So this is what it's going to look like. So once there is a task now and they click on add to do and they want to delete it, it's going to ask them, are you sure you want to delete task? If you click cancel, nothing happens. But if you go ahead and click OK, that particular task gets deleted. So there you go. Here we have a full CRUD like application that will help us undo tags on our to-do application. So now we can add different tags. For example, prototype. I'll add it to my tags. I could add something else again. Design, right? I could add tags to my tags again. I could add something else again. Deploy. I could add that to my tags again. Then I could choose to like edit this. And if I edit this, I can put it into in progress. You see that? I can edit this, put this in progress, and I can come back later on, edit this, and put it as completed, right? So it showed me completed, right? And which is cool. Then if I want to delete, for example, deploy, I can click here. It will say, are you sure you want to delete? I'll say cancel. Or if I really want to delete, I'll click OK, and there you go. I've deleted that particular task. Or better still, we'll do it. So I will do. So this is a complete CRUD application on to-do list, right? So we can create tasks, we can read our previously created tasks, we can edit our tasks, and of course we can trash it all on one page. So once we have this set up, the next thing I want to take a look at is one of the downside of this is that the moment we refresh, take a look at this. The moment we refresh, all our tags disappears and we start afresh all over again, right? And we want to solve this particular problem. So how do we solve this particular problem? This is where we make use of our local storage, right? Now for us to solve this particular problem, to ensure that whenever we reload, right, any tags that we have added previously like this will definitely appear back, is by using the local storage, right? So we'll come over here under our render function, and we'll pass our local storage. So we say local storage dot set item. This allows us to store an item. So in this case, let's call what we want to store, the key of what we want to store, all tags, comma, then the value of what we want to store. Now because of it's an array, we're not just going to type the value called data, we're going to stringify the data. So I'm going to say JSON dot stringify. So JSON.stringify, we put this here. The next thing that we want to have when we stringify this particular data set, we want to have data, right? So this particular line will enable us to store it. right? So for us to get it right here, we'll come back here, we'll say so local storage alt tags and also file. So here we will now say to get it since an array, we use json.parse. So this will allow us to get that particular information. So once we have that now, we're going to json.parse local storage dot get item, and in this particular case the key, which is alt tags. Let me make sure I spell that well, alt tags. So the key, which is alt tags. So once this is done, we've actually solved that particular issue there. We've actually solved that particular issue there. So the next thing we want to do is basically try to reload this. So once we save this now, click on add to do. If you refresh it, you see upon refresh, our to do is still there, it's not disappearing, which means everything is working fine. So let's try it now. Add my to do traveling, add another one called working, add it to do. So I have it here. So if I edit this to pending, in progress, save it as pending, I will go back and refresh. So if I refresh, everything is still there working out for me. So no matter what I do, no matter if I refresh, I come back to the site later on, everything will still be working fine for me, right? So I could choose to trash this as well and say here. So this is how you build a simple to do, right? So some other issues that you face at traveling is going back to add again. You could see that that particular value is still there, right? For example, you still see traveling, so you want to clear this particular stuff on adding. So if you want to clear it, it's also very simple. So let's try and just solve this particular little stuff. So if you want to clear it, you remember where we added, where we created this create. So this allows us to create. So before you hide stuff, right, you can say document.get element by id dot value, right? You can copy this here, paste it down here, and say dot value now is equal to empty string. So once you just empty the string here, anytime we add an information, add tags, we add something, let's say working, for example, working has been added again, go back, see it's empty now. So that will enable us to create. So let's try on edit too as well. So okay, edit, everything is working fine with edit. So because edits, that case of editing will not really happen, because each time you click on edit, it actually shows you the current version. So yeah, so right here we have a perfect to do application that you can do. So in the next video, I'll be showing you guys how you can deploy this particular application, and so I can have a link to it, and yeah, and you can share it with friends, and you can start using this particular application. And see you in the next video where we'll discuss hosting on Netlify. Thank you for watching this particular video.